Excellent. Welcome to Quintessential Comics, the July Book Club 2015. I'm Alice Quinn, your host, and today we are talking about some great comics. We got Nothing Can Possibly Go Wrong by Prudence Shen and Faith Erin Hicks, and we got We Stand on Guard, which is by Brian K. Vaughan, Steve Skroce. Is that how you pronounce that? Adam, do you know how to pronounce that?
I'm gonna go with you. I'm gonna go with you on that one. I think
Okay.
that's what I would probably attempt if I were asked to pronounce that correctly. That'd be my guess.
Okay, cool. So I think it's Skroce with Matt Hollingsworth and
Phonographics
with an F because they're too cool for a PH. And today with me, I got my buddy Adam McNeil.
Hey everybody. Good to be here. It's good to talk some comics.
Oh man, and what else is there? Like other than talking comics? Like what would you do with your life if you weren't like talking comics?
Couldn't imagine it. I always kind of thought, that I would sort of outgrow my love for comics, and that was actually happening. And I remember that happening. It was a scary, scary time. And I started reading Chris Claremont's X-Men, actually, which had a very relevant footing. I was like, Genosha is South Africa is Genosha. And I kind of got it. And I was like, okay, comics can really be relevant and comics can really have something to say and many times go under the radar in so doing. And so, I got to meet him just a little while ago. So that kept me reading comics and I guess, yeah.
Nice. Yeah, when I was about 14, I was in this awkward phase between I've read all the children's fiction, I've read a bunch of the teen stuff, and I'm still not at that level to read adult stuff. And that's when I started reading comics and graphic novels, and I've never gone back. No, I read a bit of everything now, and I've been reading some books recently. I work at the library, so it's
you kind of have to, otherwise you have no street cred in there.
Street cred, it's book cred. You gotta have your literary credentials.
Aisle cred.
Cool. So let's stop reminiscing about ourselves and let's talk about the comics. First up, we're gonna talk about our graphic novel. We got Nothing Can Possibly Go Wrong. What did you think about? Oh, hey, I didn't open it. Okay, cool. What did you think about this one?
Well, okay. Initially, I was struck by the artwork, which I found to be different. But I don't want to say it was like Scott Pilgrim, but it was a bit. It made me feel that way. I think it was the certain ways characters' faces were, expressionalized. And so on, and I like the sketchy feel of it. So that initially I liked that. I thought it had a cool, playful vibe. And there were things later on in it that I really liked, like the what was it, Team Rock Opera? Team Rock Opera was great, and I thought that was kind of, that's where the comic got a little bit fourth wall for me, if it did at all. Because where it started to sort of consider itself as a publication in a certain type of culture, and we might have called that team, or the writers may have called that team, Team Reddit or Team Gamergate, just as well. I thought it was pretty poignant and a tough point to miss, and I really liked that. So.
Nice. Yeah, no, I really, overall, I enjoyed it. I was also struck by the fact that Hicks's art is really similar to Brian Lee O'Malley. I feel like they have that same sort of manga influence, but East meets West type.
Yeah, that sort of ethos. Yeah.
So, overall, I enjoyed it. I'm just going to take a second to shout out to people in our chat interacting with us. Hey, JM, good to see you. Thanks for letting us know we sound good, Vendicious. It's always good to know right off the bat. whether there's any technical difficulties. So yeah, the art, I feel it works for this comic. I don't feel like this type of art works for everybody at any time, but
No, certainly not.
Even just this like opening page, it's so teen.
Right?
So,
It's yeah. I actually got a Scott Pilgrim meets Saved by the Bell kind of vibe off of this. Like it is clearly geared towards maybe a bit of a younger audience, and maybe I'm old and have lost the plot. I still, it didn't prevent me from enjoying it. It made me think about high school in that sort of way where you look back at it, where at the time it feels normal because it's sort of your only frame of reference, and then you look back at it when you have a broader worldview and you think, wow, man, that stuff really happened. That was pretty weird. So
yeah.
in that way, the hyper real vibe of it kind of worked. I don't know if everybody's
opening page is like so hyper real. It's just like text breakup, right?
Yeah, exactly.
That's it. So,
yeah.
I mean, I like right off the bat that got me in it because even though I'm not a teenager anymore, that element of like drama and that feeling of like immediacy where like it all matters, even though like looking back you're like that didn't really matter, but like then it's like everything. So
right, and you're dropped down right into it, and it doesn't waste. It doesn't take a lot of time, defining characters, sort of like the characters' behaviors and the things they say, even in the cases where some of them only have a few things to say. Define those characters, effectively and quickly. I find.
She didn't even like name the twins that were in the robotics club.
Yeah, right.
The end of the book, where they're like, "Oh yeah, those guys are now class president."
Yeah.
And one of the characters is like, "I didn't even know their names," and it's just
right.
Like, yes.
And I laughed actually out loud on the TTC at that part when I finished it this morning. Because I'd been full disclosure. I had been thinking that the twins were kind of these like cute androgynous, like, tomboy types. And no, they were actually just skinny dudes. Because it's tough to tell because the characters are so, the way that they're drawing everything. But I like that. So I had a good chuckle at myself. And the book made me do that. But that was also pretty funny that they kind of called that out at the end. For sure.
Yeah, no, those like androgynous twins are like very like Oren's high school host club. Like there's a lot of those like archetypes, and I like how they're sort of how creators are sort of playing with that.
Oh, definitely. Like even when they're in the SUV and their parents are all wondering why they've gone hooky on Thanksgiving dinner, right? And the twins are actually answering in tandem, like it's an 80s Bryan Singer film or something. But I thought it was really funny. It was a cool little device.
I mean, but everything in this book, it feels so perfect, so right. Like this jock who's afraid of the cheerleaders. Who goes out and breaks up with them depending on what the cheerleader wants because he's like a wet blanket and will just do whatever that they tell him as long as they leave him, like as long as he gets like peace, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Also, why I liked the entry of Team Rock Opera there, where the archetype turned on its head. The self-proclaimed geek or whatever who's not fit in their whole life and now is in some kind of position to reject or alienate other people based on labels. It was interesting. I liked it. It was fun.
Oh yeah, that part was so good. Where it's like
so good, and then they started ripping on.
You don't belong here.
Yeah, and then they started ripping on Team Awesome because they got a girl, and that should have been maybe my first tip off that the twins were not female. But anyway.
Yeah. No, and like,
Joe here is amazing.
Yeah. They're all really interesting and unique characters. I can't remember. Do you remember her name?
Yeah, it was Joe.
Joe?
Yeah,
Okay,
Joanna,
yeah.
I presume. Yeah.
Yeah, Joanna. So Joanna was super cool. And I don't know, they were cool. I liked them. They were good. There was like a couple of things I really thought were interesting. The way they keep the way they show and not tell a bunch of stuff. So they're not like, hey, this character doesn't have a good relationship with his mom.
Yeah.
It's just like constantly like dad's like, oh, you should call mom, and like him like looking at his phone and ignoring calls from his mom.
Right.
And it's only like later on, once you're invested with the character, that you find out his parents got divorced and she moved away, and he doesn't like any of it.
Right.
And all he has, he doesn't like, he's a kid. He doesn't have control over whether his parents stay married or where they move to, but he can control how often he talks to them, right?
Yeah,
and so that's where he's taking it out on them.
Yes, that's true. And I mean, there were also things where that was kind of percolating to the surface for the group. I mean, Joe was taking notice of that, and she was seeing a different side of Nolan and she even acknowledges like her presumptions about him later on, right? And it's pretty obvious that there's like some chemistry between them. But you see that happening, and in no overt way. It's subtle in the panels. You see that happening before it's verbalized, and that's pretty cool too. It has that whole kind of high school, flirtatious, the way things sometimes happen painfully slowly when we're in high school when it comes to members of the opposite sex. It had that kind of feeling about it to me, and so I thought that was captured nicely.
Yeah. What I also really enjoyed was this guy right here, who's like his buddy,
Charlie.
Charlie.
Yeah.
Charlie. No. It's Charlie Nolan and Nate Harding. So
I
feel like
sorry, you're right. Yeah.
He's Nate.
It's Nate. Yeah.
So I really like him because he's the all up in your face character for like the whole crew. So wherever we need something explained or wherever we need the plot expedited, it's just him being like, listen, I'll tell you all about it so we can get on the same page, and just sort of like yelling at Charlie, yelling at the other characters, but really giving us a chance to know what's going on. Right. So his whole lowdown of like, here's what we're gonna do. We need to get to the robotics competition. In order to do that, we're gonna do this like battle bots thing so we can win the money, so we can afford to go to the competition.
It was so needlessly complicated, but it was it was good.
Yeah, and like having that one character who's all up in your face already explain that is super great. And yeah, I just thought that like that character was such a really great device for like moving the plot forward and getting people acclimated.
Definitely. And we got our Saved by the Bell like morality lesson out of it at the end, right?
Yeah.
Like, don't focus on your petty differences in terms of social labels, because we're all stronger when we work together, kind of thing.
Yeah.
It was super Saved by the Bell, man.
Very much so. But yeah, it was great where they found unequal ground, because it begins with, Charlie has this stuff going on with the cheerleaders, and like Nate's his friend at home and out of school, but nobody at school knows that Nate and Charlie are friends. Charlie's a jock and Nate's
because they don't belong together. Yeah.
Right. So I really like how they have to cross sides, and how the principal's like, neither of you guys are getting funding, so they have to, so Nate comes up with this plan so that they can all work together.
Yes.
Yeah, I thought it was really well done. The art works for the story. The characters are interesting, and like there isn't a lot of fluff in there. Sometimes, last month's comic, I complained because there was a lot of the same panels, a lot of the same stuff over and over. It was like, we've already established that, you don't need to do another page about that.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I don't know. You should watch the episode about Toon where like totally rip it apart.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that one was kind of brutal. I got all my gal pals in here, and we just like, we didn't hold anything back.
Was there?
Apparently, the second volume's really good.
Okay.
So I have to read it.
Well, that's like some television series too, isn't it? Like, I mean, I wasn't overwhelmed with this, but it was, it was fun, and and it was pretty good. And I thought that it did a lot of things really well. I would really like to see a secondary effort on something different to see, you know.
Faith Erin Hicks has done a lot of stuff. I actually don't know quite about Providence Shen, but Faith Erin Hicks has done a lot of books afterwards. But I think they're still mostly like teen oriented and focused.
Cool. Well, it's a good market. I'm glad it exists. It didn't even exist when I was a teenager. It happened like afterwards, you know. Tons of stuff that I was reading when I was a teenager has now also been rebranded as teen market. I've noticed, like Ender's Game, for example.
Yeah. So it's funny because like stuff will come out and people will put whatever labels on it, and then 10 years later, you know, the audience will have consumed it and rebranded it themselves.
Yeah. Fair enough.
Right.
Yeah. Anyway, the last thing I would say about this is the paper was really nice. Wasn't the paper nice?
Paper was nice.
It felt good, right? Like to flip through the pages, it did. Yeah, it was.
No, it really makes a difference when the publishers like take the time to make sure it works. Like mine's bending a little, but that's because I tossed it around and used it. But yeah, the paper works, the printing works. I like the soft cover.
Mm-hmm.
Soft touch. It's nice.
No,
nice.
It's very nice.
Thank you for a second for printing up the pretty. Cool. So let me just like head back to the chat and see if anybody wants to discuss. No, it doesn't seem like anybody wants to discuss this book. Maybe they're all waiting. We're all waiting for our next epic. The
next book.
Boom.
I'm really looking forward to following this. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Guard. Oh yeah. So, what did you think? I'm gonna let you go first.
Okay. Here's what I think, and I just thought of this now. So remember, like a week or two ago, when Tim Hortons released their, they released like a set of emojis, and it was all kind of pop Canadiana stuff. I feel like this is going to be the post-apocalyptic science fiction comic book version of that emoji set, because it's already like rife with Canadian kind of trivia and themes. It's I also think that it kind of reflects a certain set of anxieties that probably Canada as a nation has had for like a really long time. Like maybe not so literal, but in a post-apocalyptic kind of context. I mean, or a context that's, you know, different than sort of the North America that we grew up in. I mean, none of us fool ourselves that country controls the largest military in the world. I mean, they could take us over by lunchtime tomorrow if they wanted to, right? But the trick is, I suppose, with that, and this is me as a guy who studied a lot of military history. I decided to do something really pointless but absolutely fascinating. And what it is it's one thing to take a territory, it's another thing to hold it. And Canada is vast and expansive, and it's basically like a jungle, as the Europeans learned when they came here and they had to fight against First Nations people with guerrilla tactics, and they weren't prepared for it because it was a whole different style of fighting. And I think we're going to see those kinds of themes at play in this title.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I'm going to take those comments bit by bit. I'm going to, for those of you, our viewers who haven't read this one, it starts off a little like this, where they're at home, they're watching this breaking news on the TV, somebody's attacking skates. Who would do that? Who would pull it off? And one of the kids is like, well, what if it was us? Ba-dum-bum-bum. Yeah. And the art's super cool. And then it flashes forward to like years later, and you're following the youngest child in that family who's now alone.
And like a grown woman.
Oh, yeah. Like a grown woman. She didn't say a child years later.
No.
That would be weird.
It's that many years later, yeah.
And so it seems like she's, surviving on her own. We get this really cool image of her taking down this bot, and being like, yo, your French sucks, which is so Canadian.
Yeah.
Yeah, very Canadian.
There's a lot of very Canadian moments that I really liked, that being one for sure.
Yeah, so that's one of the things I really enjoyed about this comic, is that it was genuinely Canadian. Yeah, the only thing is, like, even as a Canadian, my French isn't very good. So it's one of those things, like, either at the bottom of the page or maybe in the back of the book, they should have translations for all the French stuff.
Yeah, maybe.
They should. And
or
actually,
right in the panel.
I should have double checked. They might in the back. But
I don't know. I didn't notice anything.
I didn't notice anything either.
I used to read all these, like, the old G.I. Joe comics that were, like, set in China and stuff, like the ones that were way more serious than the cartoon, and they always had translations, but they posted them in panel in, like, brackets in a little box, which was fine.
Yeah, I can understand if it, like, clutters up your panel structure, if you want to have it at the bottom of the page, or even just, like, an asterisk, and then at the end of the comic have your translations. But yeah, even as, like, a Canadian who spent...
Maybe it's uniquely Canadian to not have any explanation as to what the French people are saying. Screw you if you don't understand.
That's not Canadian. It's Canadian to be like, oh, pardon me, can I translate that for you in a non-condescending manner? That's super Canadian. Especially the pardon me part. Yeah, other things I really liked about this is there's this scene at the end where there's this medic who's helping. So sorry, I'm jumping ahead. So she encounters these people.
A ragtag band of freedom fighters is what I would call them.
They are literally a ragtag,
very ragtag
of freedom fighters. And so one of these guys...
look at that dog thing.
That dog thing. So this guy here is this medic, and he, he's helping patch her up, and he, like, rips off the pieces of his shirt to patch her up. And she's like, Superman tattoo. And he's like, yeah, so Canadian.
Yeah, he's got a Superman tattoo, and he tells the story of Joe Shuster. Yeah.
Which is, like, one of those things, it's like, I always wonder, like, what makes it Canadian? Because is it, like, the creative team? Is it where, like, because when it comes to, like, films, it's not where it's shot, it's not where it's produced, it's not where the actors are from, it's not where the director's from, it's where the money is from. Because lots of Hollywood stuff is shot in Canada with Canadian crews and Canadian actors who live in Hollywood. Yes. And, comics are also like that, where it's like, oh, okay, well, the letterist is Canadian, the colorist is Canadian, but the artist and the writer are American, or... like, the artist and the writer and, like, the team is Canadian, but it's an American publisher that's printed in America. Like, what makes it Canadian? That's one of those things I'm always really interested in because there's so much of our culture that's mixed with the States. And that's one of the things this comic explores, because... yeah,
it's cultural appropriation is what it is. This is an outrage. No, I hear what you're saying, though. I mean, maybe other sorts of legal guidelines, when there's a gray area or whatever, they say, okay, there's like 5 criteria and you have to satisfy 3 of them or whatever, right? And that could be printed in, illustrated in, inked in, written in, whatever, or where the money goes as another criteria. But, maybe if you satisfy the majority of the criteria list, that would seem that that's fair game for at least partial credit to me,
Yeah, but, like, even still, like, going back to that Superman analogy, like, Joe Shuster, who was the one that created the visual design and drew Superman, was from Toronto and based Metropolis off of our fair city of Toronto.
Which is great, yeah.
Which is great, but the other guy, whatever his name is.
Whatever. Yeah.
He's not Joe Shuster, so I don't have to remember his name.
Yeah. Whatever.
He's American, right? And like the other thing is like ideas and creations like this, they come from a lot of places. You know, you take a little bit of here, you take a little bit of there, you put it together in your new thing, and it's like, well, where does it actually come from?
Especially anymore, there's so much borrowed, and so much of even the things that, you know, when we read things like comics, or when we I mean, it's in all forms of media. So much of what makes it valuable is its it's drawings from other people, you know, or drawings from other works, and it's allusions to other things. I mean, that's what makes it work for us anymore. It's
what they call the salad. Rather than the melting pot, we have a salad where you can individually taste all the pieces, but they come together as a better whole. I'm just going to shout out to the comments. JM is interacting with us on the French part, where he's like, listen, no way, people have to Google it. It only makes the book more authentic. Not giving everything to people in a book like that makes people interact with the book outside of the book.
Yeah, that's valid.
It more memorable.
I'll agree with that too. Like, you know how in let's say Firefly, okay, they're constantly cussing, and there are whole fan-driven boards online.
Oh, cussing in Mandarin. Yeah,
devoted to deciphering what it is that they're saying and breaking it down by reference so that people can look it up. And in that way, I agree with this commenter. It takes the narrative outside of the work a little bit, and that's always fun. It takes it into the social realm a little bit, and why not? Why shouldn't it? So that's cool. Yeah. I'm totally cool with them not explaining it. And, you know, I can't speak French very well, but I can read it well enough that I didn't need that. But probably a lot of people do, especially non-Canadians who didn't have to take it at all in school, right?
Yeah, well, the thing is, I'm wondering about the reach of this book, because it is Brian K. Vaughan, and he's just hitting it out of the park right now with Saga and previously Why the Last Man. So I'm wondering how many people who like aren't Canadians, don't know much about Canada, picked up this book because of that title, because of that reader, and are now maybe interested in Canadian culture. Who knows?
I don't know. I mean, I knew a guy once who, until his family moved to Canada for work, he lived in Michigan, and he had lived for 15 years. He had lived about a 20-kilometer drive from the Canadian-U.S. border, and not once had his family ever were like curious enough to just drive over the border and see what was on the other side. And they lived 20 minutes from it. So I think that there's maybe like, I don't know, there's maybe some national disinterest in us. And I kind of get that. That's fine. You know, like you got to laugh about it, but I don't know. So I don't know if people like the maple leaf might be a turnoff on the cover for some readers, or they might think, or they might rightly assume that it's full of allusions that they wouldn't understand, you know?
Well, actually, speaking what you said about maple leaf on the cover, there was going to be a title in the New 52 last year called Justice League Canada, but because it was called Justice League Canada, and because it had a maple leaf on the cover, the publisher didn't think it would sell well, so they did the exact same story with all Canadian superheroes and titled it Justice League United. So that's what it was called, and it was because there was a maple leaf on the cover, and they didn't know if Canada would sell.
Maybe there's merit to that. I mean, hardly anybody bought Alpha Flight, and it didn't have Canada in the title.
Well, it was also Alpha Flight. Let's be honest here. I'm just going to do another capture from our buddy JM in the comment. He says, what makes it Canadian? Number of donuts consumed during the production. #truth.
Maybe we should ask for a source if there's if the writers are, acknowledge that they dove into donuts to get properly into the headspace of the Canadian culture.
Tidbits did you eat?
To get inspired to write this.
Cream glazed Timbits.
Did you notice the name? It's in the very last panel, I believe. I could pick it up and figure it out, but I think it's in the very last panel. The name, what they call their ragtag rebel outfit.
No, find it.
Okay, I will.
My thing's taped up here.
It's kind of Canadian, but not really. It's also kind of accessible. Right. So she says, "What about me?" Right after they hand her the pistol, and she shoots the pilot of the big robot.
Yeah, and the head guy's giving out all the assignments.
Yeah, and she's giving out all the assignments, and so our ginger-haired maiden says, "What about me?" And then on the last panel, she says, "Welcome to the 2-4." So they're called a 2-4, like a case of beer. They're named after a case of beer, which is great.
Yeah, I thought that was pretty great. Yeah, there's a lot of Canadian references, but yeah, like you said, this comic touches up on a lot of anxiety and tension that Canadians have had. And I agree, where it's like, yeah, we have the largest undefended border.
We actually don't anymore.
Like, we don't anymore.
We don't anymore. That was a fairy tale they told us in grade school, and one day that was no longer a thing, if you'll recall. And now now you need a passport. So like it's that kind of thing where it's dystopian fiction that from a current day standpoint, in hindsight, is a little bit prophetic. I mean, I don't know if you remember, but the CBC even did a movie called H2O. Starring Paul Gross. I actually think Paul Gross like wrote it and directed it and everything, but that was about Americans in collusion with the Canadian government staging a phony terrorist attack to frighten people and get them behind a cause. And the Americans, our big armored brothers, roll in to support us and help us, keep our vast country secure against this imminent terrorist threat, which doesn't exist. And then once the Canadian Prime Minister, Paul Gross, once he becomes Prime Minister, because that's his whole objective through this conflict, he kindly asks his American friends to leave, and they won't.
Is this, sorry, are you talking about a fake story or a real story? No,
it's a real story. It's a CBC made for TV. It's like a TV docudrama thing. It's shot a little bit like a docudrama, but it's speculative fiction, and it's this whole thing. This guy wants to be Canadian Prime Minister, and he sells out to the Americans, and they prop up this whole false terrorism threat, and the Americans come in full force, but then won't leave after the game is up, and that's the way. And the movie ends right there. It's just like Canada gone, credits roll, and
yeah,
it's
like really interesting docudrama. Well,
it's not a real. It's like
it's like a mockumentary, right?
It's a mockudrama, yeah. But it's also about the the value of our water natural resource. Same idea. There aren't robots and stuff, but similar theme, and so that's one of the reasons I think it reflects these anxieties.
Yeah, and so I really like, again, how we can explore what it means to be Canadian, the anxieties and fears of Canadians being so close to the United States and having our cultures and our products really mixed of the two of them, and like really exploring all of that.
Yeah, I know. I think it has enormous potential, and I mean, considering the way that politics were explored and revealed in Why the Last Man, right? Like, I just think that there's so much talent behind what is a rich, it's rich soil for ideas and humor, even, lots of humor, for sure, and irony, and I think it's going to be really fun. I would totally recommend people check this out.
Cool. Just hold on, just a second. Yeah, I think this is really cool. I think it's slated to be a limited 4-part miniseries. Right. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that's what it said in my previews.
Yeah, no, it's true. But if we've seen that change if something gets enough attention and enough interest. It's the same reason there is for everything else, right? Money.
Money.
I don't know. We'll see if the talent behind this book puts enough attention its way that we, I don't know, even get another miniseries later on, in the same kind of world. That would be really cool.
Yeah. So I'm just going to do some more comments. So ever hear of
Wag the Dog? He's right. It's Wag the Dog with Dustin Hoffman and Dennis Leary and Rosie O'Donnell and
Yeah.
all kinds of
But
people.
a president staging a fake war that never happened in order to take away from another incident.
Yeah.
Very poignant, JM. Thank you.
Sure. Well, also in Orwell's 1984, and I've read that book a lot, and every time I read it, it starts to sound more and more like American foreign policy. Whoops! Now there's a file on me. Oops. But you know, in that, the protagonist eventually discovers that the state is bombing its own people to prop up the story of a false war as well.
So that's interesting, and like,
Yeah.
you know, like, I don't know if you picked up on this, but in the opening scene where the family is talking about it, the mother's like, "Oh, I have clearance. I should know," and stuff like that,
Yeah.
because she's worked for the government, and it seems like she's hooked in, and it's like, wait, did Canada actually bomb them? And that's what I was thinking of, was like, did it actually happen? Because it doesn't seem like even someone in the government, even someone who seems to be in the know, like.
Yeah. I mean, I don't really think we have the means to launch an attack on the United States, but I think that's going to be a mystery that that's going to be the big question as the miniseries unfolds. I think is did that actually happen, or was it a miscommunication, or did it just look like that? Right. I mean, I don't know. I certainly don't think that, Canada would be in favor of getting into, or most Canadians would be in favor of us getting into a war on our own soil. We're not really equipped for that. But
Well, yeah, but it also takes place in the future.
That's true. I mean, a little ways into the future, though, not real far. So it's
like
so
years.
you have to wonder, like, how much can change in 20 years. That said, I feel like I've seen our government change a lot in the last 20 years. We used to have referendums and things, and now stuff seems to happen pretty quickly and without a lot of public consult a lot of the time.
Harper got a majority in everything, and now he just does what he wants, and country be damned.
Yeah, it kind of feels like a little bit
I'm
like
on the list. So I just wanted I just wanted to point out the art on this page in these panels. What did you think specifically about the art on this book, and what they chose to do with it?
I loved it, actually. I thought it was really illustrative. I thought it was really nicely illustrated. It was kind of artsy. It was also, I don't know, it had really great textures, and I really liked the use of light. I thought it was really great.
I thought the way they did these robot characters, that's a lot of detail, a lot of moving parts, and then equally as much detail over here on this deer.
Right.
So I thought it was like, generally I'm not a huge fan of.
That's either a reindeer or a caribou, though.
Sorry. I haven't spent enough time in the wild this time.
Bad Canadian.
Ah! So which is it?
Which is what? Oh, I don't know. I think it's a caribou.
Okay, no, that's cool. Yeah, no, I think sometimes this art doesn't work for the story, but I feel like this story in particular, it works really well.
Didn't it feel kind of Canadian? Like they got the landscape just right, and I thought a lot of it had to do with the light for some reason. So I don't know.
And like the colorists did a really good job on it.
Yeah, I just thought, this feels legit. Like I've spent enough time in the Canadian wilderness. It did. It felt legit.
Cool. Oh, more comments. Hold on. Hold the phone. We aren't going anywhere yet. Pull it up on screen. Sorry, I do like little musical interludes when.
Maybe he's going to clarify our caribou question.
No. He says, "Oops, I'll put it on me." He says it was all about our water line that made me think of the conspiracies regarding 9/11 and excuses to invade Iraq. Yes,
I think that's very true. Yeah,
and it's very right, because when the 2-4 the 2-4 team gets introduced to our main character, they also have theories about what's going on. So it's clear that like even years and years later, nobody really knows.
Nobody really knows what happened.
Because like at that point, I mean, I don't have a picture of that specific page, but there's a page where it's just like bombs everywhere.
Yeah, it's right after the first panel where they're watching it on the news. Her father looks outside, and there are bombs falling. They're American bombs too. They're marked. It's clearly
it's clearly marked.
Yeah.
So it seems like communication has broken down, and yeah, I think it's really interesting. Sometimes in first issues, I feel like they don't get enough of the characters or the story, but in this one, I feel like it's really good. You get just enough to really get you going. As people watching can see, like there's so much they've given us to work with. But not enough answers. So like we're just coming up with theories and coming up with ideas because they've left it really open-ended, but they've also started off really strong. They've given us a lot. I feel like some of the premiere issues we've read, I'll cite Mythic, which is one we read a couple months ago with the Wrenchies. That one just didn't give us a lot. Yeah, it explains some of the main characters, like who they are, what they do. Right. It sets the setting. But it didn't give me enough to want more. It didn't give me enough to read the second issue, to like care. Whereas in this one, I care. Like they've given me just enough to humanize the characters, just enough to care about these characters, and then also given me enough of a cliffhanger and enough questions after that I want to continue and figure out what happens.
And one of them dies right in the first issue. Like just quite suddenly and abruptly and violently and horribly, and it's just like you get the sense that these people are used to having bad days.
And like I really like that moment because they don't know this robot's been manned. The guy that comes out of the robot is like, I don't know, he was just a soldier. And like it really captures that like no individuals want to be in a war zone. Countries go to war, but like individuals don't want to fight.
That's very true. That's the fog of war thing that you're kind of describing. I mean, it's interesting, and people have done a lot of writing about that as well. I mean, in certain people went wild collecting stats during the Second World War. They collected stats on both sides, on both the Allied and the Axis side. And one thing that they both found in the First World War, in particular, was that people, like these soldiers, these men, they wouldn't shoot at each other. They'd deliberately fire over each other's heads. Only about 1 in 10 of them were comfortable staring down the sights of another human being and pulling the trigger. And so most of them would spend their ammunition or be accused of being a traitor. Nobody could tell whether you were hitting anybody or not. And so overwhelmingly that was the case a lot of the time, especially among inexperienced bunches of soldiers. So in a more modern context, the American military has tried to kind of make people kind of cozy up to the idea of killing each other through game theory, actually, like simulations and war games and things like that. But I think,
that's not terrifying at all.
Oh, it's totally, there's a great book by a retired American brigadier general. It's called On Killing. And that's really what it's about. It's about the human capacity to take another life and a military perspective on that, and kind of a breakdown of all of the spending that's been done trying to make soldiers more comfortable with that idea. It's a chilling read, but it's interesting.
Wow. You know what? Like when I invited you on this episode, I didn't know you had such military knowledge. I didn't invite you specifically for that, but thank you. It's made it a lot more interesting and informative. Well,
with this title, it's going to come into play, I think, for sure. We're going to see a lot of, I think, a lot of themes about different tactics and, just a lot of things that military history will show. And I think maybe even a few really cool direct parallels to moments, famous moments in military history. I wouldn't mind,
it seems like there's going to be tons of that. Even the title itself is sort of that Canadian double entendre of like, we're standing on guard, but that line as part of our national anthem. So I feel like there's going to be some educational bits, some informative bits, some bits that'll really open up your minds and make us think about this stuff, because, you know, me, you, we're comfortable in our Canadian society. The only thing that really bums us out right now is the Canadian dollar not being on par with the American dollar, because it makes our comics more expensive, and we don't like that.
No, I know. I mean, I don't know if in 4 issues, I don't think this is going to turn into. I predict kind of an unhappy ending, or at least an inconclusive ending. I think that these characters are fighting a losing battle. Let's not fool ourselves. They're fighting against overwhelming odds.
And they don't have a lot of information.
No resources. And
I feel like the journey and exploring these characters and exploring their post-apocalyptic Canada will really make us look at what we have in our modern day real life Canada.
Well, I hope it does. Yeah, I hope it does. I mean, in that way, that's what I was saying. I mean, you're seeing things like our Canadian government right now silencing scientists and things like that. But in a comic medium, these sorts of criticisms can go way under the radar. And they can reach a huge audience before anybody even notices. And I don't know, that's just one of the things that I always think is so cool about comics. So I like the element of satire in this, of political satire in this, and the potential for them to go much, much further with that.
Yeah, and the thing is, like, also within sort of like a 4-issue miniseries, it might not even be like today or tomorrow or when the whole series is out before it makes that impact, because like those issues could be, oh, it's a Canadian thing, I thought you would have liked it, and given to somebody who takes it and takes these ideas and makes something really cool with it. And like
the mixtape phenomenon.
The mixtape phenomenon. So I'm really excited to see not only the rest of We Stand on Guard, but what it makes people talk about. And I'm really glad we had this in our book club discussion, because this is something we need to talk about, and it really does provoke a lot of thought. We spent a lot of time on that this episode.
Like, what was the last thing that came out that was quintessentially Canadian was sort of the modernized Captain Canuck or whatever, which sure was a hilarious read, but you know, it's nice to feed your brain with something provocative or a good science fiction theme that, as all of them do, have one foot firmly planted in the present day, right?
Yeah. So I think it's going to be good. I'm really excited for this one. We got one more comment from the chat, and then I'm gonna wrap this up.
Cool.
This is the one. Yeah.
I
He says,
agree.
I wonder how far it can go in 4 issues. Feels like we go on a lot longer, so I wonder what direction it's going. Yeah, I agree. I'm also going to agree with you, Adam, in saying that I don't think it's gonna be a happy ending.
No, I don't.
Not in 4 issues.
No.
Or maybe it'll be like one of those like kamikaze, like, oh, we'll go all out on this mission and we'll win this battle, but we won't win the war type thing, and then they'll go out fighting.
I know.
And like
just
save
like
a
us,
village
because now the State Department has files on us, on you and me, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll save the last 2 rounds for us, Alice.
Yeah, no, they're not gonna. I'm harmless, guys. I just like talking about comics in my basement apartment. So with
Blue team, go! Cue the smoke.
What? Oh God! But I haven't finished dinner. It's sitting right here. It looks really good. I'm gonna eat it after. But yeah, I just want to wrap up. Yeah, I would recommend We Stand on Guard. I think this is definitely going to be a really interesting series. Nothing can possibly go wrong. It's cute. It's fun. It's self-contained. This would be a really good first read for a teenager. And I think it's good in general, like even as an adult, as long as you're in like a good mood. As long as you're in a good mood, it'll be totally great. Yeah, this was really good. I'm Alice Quinn. This is Quintessential Comics. Adam, do you wanna shout out?
No, that's okay. I just hopefully you'd like to have me on again sometime. This was a lot of fun. Thanks for having me.
Oh, this was totally great. You're invited every month. You are at home and have read the books and have a computer in front of you. Hurrah!
Awesome. My computer, which is about to die, I've got to plug it in.
Yeah, so
no.
subscribe to this channel. We got book clubs every month. All of our information for the book clubs are on our Facebook page. We do an event for each book club. We have the poll up for next month. So you should go into next month's book club and tell us what you think we should be reading, because I want to make this fun for everybody. So you guys get to pick what we read here on the show. Yeah, so thanks for joining us on Quintessential Comics.